My dad leaned into the microphone at the Charleston Charity Gala, his eyes scanning the room like a man who owned every gleaming crystal chandelier above us. "Get out of here, you beggar," he sneered, his voice cutting through the soft classical music that had been filling the air. The words hit me like a physical blow, though I had grown accustomed to the subtle, lingering dismissals of my childhood. Guests paused mid-conversation, their champagne glasses frozen in mid-air, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. Lila, my younger sister, smirked with a cruel amusement I recognized from a dozen family dinners, adding, "I wish I'd never been your sibling." My mother, Margaret, avoided my eyes entirely, her practiced serenity now tinged with discomfort, as though silence could somehow protect her from acknowledging what had just happened. I stood still, poised in a sleek, understated dress that I had chosen for its elegance rather than its price. Every fiber of my being pulsed with years of being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed. I had spent my entire life learning how to survive these moments of public scrutiny, how to endure the quiet cruelty of those who are supposed to love you but do not see you. And yet, even in that charged moment, I felt an unusual calm, a strange clarity that I had never experienced before. This wasn't humiliation. This was recognition waiting to unfold, though they could not yet see it. The audience, perhaps 300 people dressed in gowns and tailored suits, shifted uncomfortably. Some caught themselves mid-breath, unsure whether to continue their polite applause or retreat into quiet confusion. I watched them, noticing the micro-expressions flicker across faces. Eyebrows raise, lips purse, eyes dart. The chandeliers above seemed to dim, though I knew it was only the intensity of the silence pressing down on me. And then I saw him, Richard Chen, the CEO and man who had become my trusted partner over the past several years, standing by the podium, watching with that calm patience that had always unnerved me just slightly. He knew what was coming next, even before my family could realize it. I remembered how this scene had played out in my mind countless times, each rehearsal occurring in the quiet corners of my memory. The dismissive laughter of my father, the smug glance of Lila, my mother's habitual retreat into avoidance. In reality, nothing had prepared me for the way the room held its breath, for the way each person's attention, like a living organism, bent and swiveled toward me without my instruction. And yet I felt entirely prepared. Prepared not because I had orchestrated this moment, but because I had spent 30 years building the life that made it inevitable. I had grown up in a house ruled by subtle hierarchies. My father, Jonathan Anderson, had mastered the art of psychological control through diminishment, using words like scalpel blades. At birthday parties, he would announce achievements of Lila with flourish, while I was left to fade into the background, my successes noted with a perfunctory nod or ignored entirely. My mother, Margaret, had survived through strategic invisibility, a quiet grace that kept her safe from his sharper edges, yet she offered me little protection. Lila absorbed attention effortlessly, thriving in the spotlight that I was never granted. Every dinner, every holiday, every photograph reinforced the same lesson. I existed, yes, but I was not central, not relevant, not worth recognition. By the time I reached my late teens, I had internalized the rules of survival in this environment. I became self-reliant, understanding early that if I wanted acknowledgement, it would come from outside this family. I immersed myself in academics, finance, and practical skills that would allow me to carve out a life where my value could not be arbitrarily dismissed. Scholarships, internships, and part-time work became the scaffolding of my independence. I learned to measure my worth not by the recognition of those who failed to see me, but by the tangible outcomes of my decisions, the competence that no one could deny. In Boston during my first year at university, I rented a small apartment near campus, meticulously tracking expenses, learning investment principles, and observing patterns in the financial world. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with spreadsheets open, feeling the quiet satisfaction of seeing numbers align, understanding what was mine to control, and what was merely a reflection of chance or luck. There was freedom in that knowledge. I did not yet know that it would eventually lead me to become a founder of a bank, but I knew that it would allow me to stand on my own terms, without seeking permission or approval. The gala continued, my father's words lingering like a shadow over every polite smile, every soft laugh around the room. I could feel the microcosm of family dynamics playing out in real time. Lila leaning slightly forward in curiosity, as if trying to gauge my response. Margaret's fingers lightly tracing the rim of her wine glass, a subtle manifestation of tension. Jonathan's posture rigid, still confident, still uncomprehending that the narrative he had controlled for decades was about to be disrupted. And Richard waited, as he always did, knowing the exact moment to introduce what had been quietly, meticulously prepared for years. I moved toward a group of colleagues who had been exchanging observations about market trends. I greeted them, offering small nods and polite smiles, while my gaze occasionally drifted toward my family. They did not yet see me as I truly was. Their perception remained rooted in old assumptions that would soon crumble. The irony was not lost on me. I had spent decades invisible in their eyes, and now, at the height of a public gala, the stage was set for a truth they could not ignore. The evening's music swelled, a classical arrangement that emphasized the elegance of the room. Guests mingled, some oblivious, some sensing the subtle tension in the air. I observed patterns of attention, where the eyes of influential clients rested, how whispers traveled across tables, how the room responded unconsciously to shifts in posture and focus. Every glance, every subtle reaction reinforced the knowledge that I had built a life beyond their comprehension, a life whose impact could no longer be hidden behind familial assumptions. And yet, I remained calm. 30 years of practice had taught me to manage emotions, to regulate the tension that came with being scrutinized. I understood that the moment of recognition was not mine to demand, but to receive with composure. My achievements, the bank, the portfolio, the team, the discipline, were already real. The applause of strangers, the acknowledgement from industry peers, and the impending attention from my family were merely external confirmations, not determinants of my value. I glanced again at Richard Chen, whose presence provided a quiet reassurance. He had been my partner, my collaborator, and my guide through the complex landscape of building a financial institution from the ground up. His subtle nod conveyed understanding. He recognized the weight of this moment, the culmination of decades of quiet work and invisible struggle. In that exchange, no words were necessary. The years of preparation, of meticulous effort and disciplined growth, all converged into the calm certainty that I was ready for what was coming. The clink of glasses and soft murmurs continued around us, but I felt the room narrowing, focusing, as if the collective attention of 300 guests had condensed into a single axis directed toward me. It was familiar, the sensation of being watched, of every subtle action evaluated, of having to exist under scrutiny. But unlike before, it carried no fear. It carried anticipation and a strange sense of justice long overdue. As I adjusted my posture and allowed my eyes to scan the room, I realized that the moment of public acknowledgement, the moment when my family would be confronted with the reality of who I had become, was no longer hypothetical. It was here. And though their laughter and dismissive comments had once felt like chains, now they were irrelevant. The life I had built, the competence I had cultivated, the recognition I had earned in the professional world, all stood as proof of my worth, a worth they had denied for decades, yet could no longer ignore. The night stretched ahead, the gala continuing with its orchestrated elegance, yet I knew that the narrative had shifted. My father, my mother, my sister, they would soon be faced with a truth that could not be softened, obscured, or denied. And in that anticipation, standing amidst the chandeliers, the soft glow of candlelight, and the muted conversations of 300 people, I felt the calm clarity of one who had finally arrived at her own stage, ready to be seen exactly as she had always been. At 18, Sophia Anderson stepped off the bus in Cambridge, Massachusetts, her small suitcase rolling behind her, a mix of anxiety and excitement thrumming through her chest. She had arrived for her first year at university, a scholarship recipient in economics, a city away from Charleston and the family who had consistently dismissed her. The apartment she rented was modest, a single room with a kitchenette, its white walls bare except for a calendar marked with budget notes and deadlines. Here, she would finally be on her own, responsible for herself in every sense, untethered from the invisible hierarchy her father had imposed for decades. She carried with her a notebook filled with meticulous plans, budgets, goals, savings schedules, and projections, every number a tangible measure of her independence and self-worth. Her first morning, she brewed coffee and spread her spreadsheets across the tiny kitchen table, calculating tuition installments, rent, and the meager income she expected from a part-time job at a local financial services firm. Every penny was accounted for, every assumption challenged. Minnie Hook. She noticed an envelope slipped under her apartment door, a letter from her father congratulating her on the scholarship, but unsigned, impersonal, almost dismissive. Even here he could not refrain from asserting distance. She tucked it aside without a flicker of emotion, understanding that approval from those who had never truly seen her was irrelevant. The autonomy she had earned was sufficient. The part-time job was modest, data entry and report compilation at a small investment firm downtown. Her colleagues barely noticed her at first, assuming she was just another intern with little to contribute. Minnie Hook. On her second day, she discovered an anomaly in the client portfolio files, a series of misaligned data points that, if unchecked, could have led to significant reporting errors. Sophia flagged it discreetly, her careful diligence catching what others had overlooked. She began to understand a lesson that would become foundational. Competence could speak louder than any praise she had been denied. In the evenings, Sophia would retreat to her apartment, poring over textbooks on finance, market analysis, and investment strategy. She taught herself the fundamentals of risk assessment and portfolio management, cross-referencing with her internship projects. Minnie Hook. One night, while reviewing financial regulations, she stumbled across a memo about a distressed asset portfolio that no one in the firm wanted to touch. Her mind raced with possibilities. Here was an opportunity quietly hidden in plain sight, where her analytical skills could make a tangible difference. She noted it in her notebook, alongside her growing list of strategies and observations. Sophia's routine became a rhythm of rigorous study and disciplined work, punctuated by moments of subtle triumph. Minnie Hook. Her mentor, an associate she had impressed with her attention to detail, invited her to sit in on a client presentation. For the first time, she could see the inner workings of investment strategy, the interplay of risk, return, and communication. She absorbed everything, asking questions, taking notes, and refining her analytical thinking. Every step reinforced her self-reliance and competence, further dissociating her sense of worth from her family's opinions. By the second semester, Sophia's dedication began to draw attention. Minnie Hook. Her supervisor asked her to present a preliminary analysis to senior analysts in the firm after the usual presenter fell ill. Sophia prepared meticulously, rehearsing transitions, anticipating questions, and ensuring every chart and projection was accurate. When the presentation day arrived, her hands did not tremble, nor did her voice falter. She spoke with clarity, confidence, and precision, guiding the room through her analysis of the distressed asset portfolio. Senior analysts, initially skeptical, exchanged looks of approval and curiosity, their doubt replaced by acknowledgement. The experience was electrifying. She realized for the first time that her abilities commanded respect, independent of familial validation. Evenings after the presentation were spent reflecting on the subtle shifts she had caused. Minnie Hook. An unexpected email arrived from a client asking if Sophia would consider overseeing an additional segment of their portfolio. It was a small assignment, but it signified trust in her judgment. an external validation that she had not earned from her parents, but one far more meaningful. The contrast between the dismissive words of her father and the professional acknowledgement from strangers sharpened her sense of perspective. She recognized that worth was measurable not in terms of approval from those who had discounted her, but in the tangible impact of her work. Throughout her sophomore year, Sophia balanced academics, part-time employment, and independent research projects. She meticulously recorded outcomes, errors, and lessons learned, constantly refining her approach to investment analysis. Mini-hook, she discovered a pattern in the distressed assets that suggested a unique opportunity to create value where others saw only risk. She shared her observations with her mentor, who encouraged her to develop a proposal for potential acquisition, a step that would ultimately lay the groundwork for her future bank. Sophia's evenings were quiet but productive. She built a personal system of accountability, checklists, goals, and reflective journals that allowed her to track both progress and mistakes. Mini-hook. One night she realized that her careful record-keeping could serve as a blueprint for managing a financial institution independently. This epiphany crystallized her ambition. She would not simply work within existing structures, she would create her own. The thought was both daunting and exhilarating, and she allowed herself a rare smile, acknowledging that she was stepping into a path entirely of her own making. By her junior year, Sophia had established herself as a reliable, precise, and insightful intern, earning trust from clients and mentors alike. Mini-hook. During a client meeting, she anticipated a question about risk exposure before it was asked, and provided a thorough analysis, drawing nods of approval from the board members present. She felt the subtle thrill of influence, the recognition of competence untainted by familial bias. It was a validation that her efforts mattered in a real-world context, tangible and undeniable. The months flowed into a rhythm of disciplined work, long nights of study, and incremental professional victories. Mini-hook. Her mentor suggested she consider full-time opportunities that would allow her to oversee projects independently. Sophia recognized the implicit trust being extended, and it strengthened her resolve to continue cultivating her skills and preparing for leadership. The independence she had fought for, both financially and emotionally, was now aligning with opportunity, and she embraced the responsibility with deliberate focus. Throughout this period, Sophia maintained a mental ledger of her family's past dismissals, not as a burden, but as motivation. Mini-hook. She noted a subtle pattern. Wherever her parents had overlooked or undervalued her, she had excelled in ways they could not ignore. Each success built upon the last, creating an invisible foundation for the independent life she was constructing. It was a private, quiet triumph, reinforcing that competence and self-reliance were more sustaining than praise or acknowledgement from those who had failed to see her potential. As the end of the junior year approached, Sophia began compiling a comprehensive analysis of the distressed assets she had been observing since her internship began. Mini-hook. The portfolio contained mismanaged investments that, if acquired strategically, could yield significant returns. Sophia's plan was meticulous, detailing which assets to salvage, which to restructure, and how to mitigate risk, a blueprint for independent operation. She shared preliminary thoughts with her mentor, who recognized the potential for her to lead a project of unprecedented scale for someone her age. The realization crystallized one evening, as Sophia sat in her modest apartment, the city lights of Boston flickering through the window. Mini-hook. She recognized that the life she had quietly built, discipline, competence, opportunity, and vision, was entirely independent of the family who had consistently undervalued her. She could measure her worth in outcomes, in respect earned through skill, in the trust others placed in her abilities. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of agency, a sense of direction that no dismissive words or outdated hierarchies could undermine. In the final weeks of her sophomore year, Sophia's reputation within the firm grew. Mini-hook. Colleagues began seeking her input on complex financial decisions. Clients started requesting her analyses directly, and her mentor encouraged her to begin planning for future leadership opportunities. She balanced this with academics, using each success as a building block for her confidence and credibility. The cumulative effect was clear. Sophia had created a foundation for professional authority, entirely independent of her family's recognition. By the time she entered her senior year, Sophia had a vision for the next stage of her journey. Mini Hook. She began to conceptualize the idea of founding her own bank, one that would focus on small businesses overlooked by larger institutions. Her notes, analyses, and experiences from internships and part-time projects provided a blueprint for this ambitious step. It was a plan born of careful observation, skill, and the unwavering commitment to her own growth, a plan no dismissive words from home could negate. The chapter closes with Sophia standing on the balcony of her small apartment, overlooking the cityscape, reflecting on the years of effort and subtle victories. Mini Hook. She whispers to herself, "This is only the beginning," fully aware that the independence she has cultivated and the competence she has demonstrated will propel her into opportunities that her family could never have imagined. The sense of empowerment is profound, the anticipation of what lies ahead palpable, and the stage is set for the next chapter, her first professional break that will solidify her reputation and lay the groundwork for her own bank. Sophia Anderson had spent months building a quiet foundation of competence, and now the opportunity she had anticipated finally arrived. The small investment firm where she had interned for 2 years needed someone to present a quarterly portfolio analysis to a group of high-profile clients. The usual presenter was unexpectedly indisposed, and the responsibility fell to her. Mini Hook. Her supervisor glanced at her skeptically, clearly expecting a stumble, and Sophia felt the familiar spark of determination that had carried her through years of family dismissals. This was the moment to prove herself, not to her family who had long ignored her, but to the professional world that had begun to notice her abilities. That morning, Sophia woke early in her modest Cambridge apartment, sunlight slanting across her kitchen table. She brewed a strong cup of coffee and spread her notes and charts across the table. Each graph, each line of data, was carefully prepared and cross-referenced against previous trends. Mini Hook. She noticed a subtle discrepancy in one client's holdings that no one else had caught. A single misalignment, if left uncorrected, could have affected the integrity of the entire report. She paused, double-checked the numbers, and smiled to herself, realizing that this small discovery could make a significant impact. It was moments like this, unnoticed by her family for decades, that defined the trajectory of her future. Sophia dressed in professional attire, choosing a crisp navy blazer and tailored slacks that conveyed confidence without arrogance. Mini Hook. A colleague whispered a warning about the client's high expectations and a subtle jab at her age and experience. Sophia acknowledged it with a nod, but allowed no hint of doubt to surface. She understood that competence was measured in results, not in how others perceived her in the first 5 minutes of a meeting. Every past dismissal by her father, every smirk from her sister, every maternal glance of indifference had prepared her for this kind of scrutiny. She had learned how to step into a room where she was undervalued and make her presence undeniable through skill alone. Arriving at the firm, Sophia immediately focused on reviewing her presentation one last time. The clients were already assembling, a mix of seasoned investors and corporate representatives whose attention commanded every word spoken in the room. Mini Hook. The chief analyst assigned to assist her gave a small, apprehensive smile, indicating that he doubted the young intern could navigate the complexity of the discussion. Sophia met his gaze and said quietly, "Let's make sure this is accurate. That's all that matters." Her calm authority surprised him, and the tension in the room subtly shifted. The meeting began. Sophia stood at the front, her laptop connected to the projector, and began to speak with deliberate clarity. She outlined the portfolio's assets, highlighting trends and pointing out risks and opportunities. Mini hook. When she reached the anomaly she had discovered, she paused, allowing the significance of the correction to register with the room. Clients leaned forward, absorbing the meticulous analysis that she presented. Her voice was steady, her explanations concise, her charts easy to follow yet comprehensive. Every question posed was met with informed responses, showing insight and command of the material that even seasoned professionals respected. Sophia could see the room reacting, subtle micro-expressions revealing curiosity, interest, and a growing respect. Mini hook. One senior investor, known for his exacting standards, nodded approvingly and scribbled notes on a pad, clearly impressed by her attention to detail and foresight. Another client leaned in and asked follow-up questions, which Sophia answered with the same composed confidence, seamlessly integrating additional data points and clarifying potential uncertainties. She realized, with a quiet thrill, that she was commanding attention without needing to boast or exaggerate. Halfway through the presentation, Sophia encountered a particularly challenging question about projected risk exposure. Mini hook. Instead of faltering, she referenced historical data, illustrated potential outcomes, and proposed a risk mitigation strategy that addressed every aspect of the concern. The room grew quiet as the clients absorbed her reasoning, and for the first time in her career, Sophia felt a tangible sense of authority. This was competence recognized on its own terms, without any need for her family's acknowledgement. The pattern she had learned to observe in her childhood, the subtle hierarchy, the dismissal, the expectation that she would remain peripheral, was now inverted. Here, she was indispensable. After the formal presentation concluded, Sophia fielded individual questions from clients, each more complex than the last. Mini hook. A particularly high-profile client requested a private meeting to discuss potential collaboration on a project Sophia had not previously considered. She accepted politely, noting it as a pivotal opportunity to demonstrate her skill on a larger stage. Her mentor, sitting quietly at the back, watched with a knowing smile, aware that this moment marked a turning point in her professional visibility. The adrenaline of the meeting left Sophia exhilarated, but not flustered. Mini hook. The chief analyst who had doubted her competence approached quietly and admitted almost sheepishly that her analysis had revealed patterns he had not considered. Sophia nodded, acknowledging his expertise while recognizing the validation she had earned through her own diligence. She realized that her years of preparation, independent study, and unwavering attention to detail had culminated in this moment of recognition outside her family's shadow. Returning to her apartment that evening, Sophia reflected on the day's events. Mini hook. She opened her email to find a note from one of the senior investors expressing interest in her involvement in a larger portfolio, praising her clarity and foresight. The recognition was tangible and earned through merit alone. She thought about the contrast between this acknowledgement and the dismissals she had endured from her father, the casual cruelty of her sister, and her mother's habitual avoidance. For the first time, she saw that competence, persistence, and independence could command respect in a way that familial approval never had. Sophia spent the night preparing notes and reflections for future projects, integrating feedback and analyzing the outcomes of her presentation. Mini hook. She noted that a few discrepancies she had corrected would now prevent potential losses, illustrating the real-world impact of her diligence. This reinforced a lesson she had internalized long ago, that competence creates undeniable value, independent of external validation from those who are blind to it. In the following weeks, Sophia's reputation within the firm grew steadily. Clients began requesting her input on complex analyses. Colleagues sought her perspective, and her mentor encouraged her to take leadership roles on smaller projects. Mini hook. She discovered another undervalued portfolio segment, applying the same analytical rigor, positioning herself as someone capable of seeing what others missed. Her family, unaware of her rising professional influence, remained oblivious to the significance of these achievements. Sophia's evenings were filled with reflection and strategy. She maintained meticulous records of every analysis, every projection, every outcome, constantly refining her methods. Mini-hook, she realized that her notes could form the blueprint for her own financial enterprise in the future, a step that would eventually lead to founding a bank. The insight was exhilarating. It confirmed that her independent efforts had not only produced immediate recognition, but had also set the stage for long-term empowerment and leadership. By the end of the academic year, Sophia had become a respected and reliable contributor within the firm. Mini-hook. During a casual hallway conversation, a senior client casually mentioned an opening in a project that required someone to lead a portfolio previously neglected by the company. Sophia's eyes lit with quiet determination. She recognized this as the first step toward owning her own professional destiny. The opportunity was subtle but significant, promising both challenge and growth. Sophia's personal growth mirrored her professional ascent. Mini-hook, she began to see patterns in her own decision-making, identifying strengths in foresight, discipline, and resilience. Each success, each acknowledgement, further separated her from the undervaluation of her family, creating a sense of empowerment that was entirely her own. She understood that recognition from others, mentors, clients, colleagues, was meaningful precisely because it was earned and untainted by the dismissive perceptions of those who had never believed in her. The chapter closes with Sophia sitting at her kitchen table late one night, the Boston skyline glowing beyond her window, reviewing the week's accomplishments and planning for the next. Mini-hook, she whispered to herself. This is the beginning of everything. Fully aware that the foundation she had built through discipline, competence, and independence would carry her into future opportunities, culminating in the establishment of her own bank. She had crossed a threshold. The world had begun to recognize her worth, and she was prepared to step confidently into the path she had long envisioned, undeterred by those who had once dismissed her. Sophia Anderson had reached a point in her career where the small victories of internship presentations and part-time project leadership no longer sufficed. She wanted more than recognition within the firm. She wanted to create something lasting, something that could not be dismissed, overlooked, or attributed to anyone but herself. Mini-hook. A confidential report from her mentor suggested that a small, distressed asset portfolio was available for acquisition, abandoned by larger firms due to perceived risk. The opportunity was subtle but significant, a chance for Sophia to step into real leadership, to apply her analytical skills in a context that demanded independence, judgment, and courage. She felt a thrill she had never experienced in the measured confines of university classrooms or corporate meetings, an adrenaline mixed with responsibility and anticipation. Sophia began to map out the possibilities, drafting spreadsheets late into the night in her modest Cambridge apartment. She accounted for every variable: asset quality, potential revenue streams, risk exposure, and mitigation strategies. Mini-hook. She noticed anomalies in the financial data, small, overlooked errors that, if corrected, could substantially increase profitability. She marked them carefully, aware that these subtle details might be the difference between success and failure. Her eyes traced the lines of numbers and charts, her mind running through scenarios and contingencies with the precision of someone who had learned discipline from necessity and experience. She was no longer an intern executing instructions. She was a strategist, laying the groundwork for an enterprise that would bear her vision. In the weeks that followed, Sophia met regularly with Richard Chen, her mentor and partner in professional growth. Mini-hook. Richard proposed that they explore creating a new banking entity focused on small businesses overlooked by large institutions, using the distressed asset portfolio as a foundation. Sophia considered the risks carefully: regulatory hurdles, capital requirements, operational complexity, and market competition. Each challenge was formidable, But the greater risk would be to let fear prevent her from pursuing an opportunity she had meticulously prepared for years. Together, they analyzed potential structures, evaluated staffing needs, and drafted operational frameworks, every step informed by the lessons she had learned from her internships and early career experiences. Sophia also spent time reflecting on her own motivations. Minnie Hook. She recalled the countless evenings in Charleston, watching her father's attention flow to Lila while her accomplishments went unnoticed, her mother's quiet avoidance, and the subtle cruelty of her father's words. Those experiences had instilled resilience, patience, and an unspoken understanding of power dynamics, all of which she now applied in planning her venture. She understood that independence and control would be paramount. This bank would be an institution reflecting her vision, her standards, and her ethics, rather than the expectations or prejudices of others. The first practical step was assembling a small, capable team. Sophia interviewed analysts, operations specialists, and compliance officers, looking not just for skills, but for alignment with her principles: integrity, diligence, and innovation. Minnie Hook. During one interview, a potential hire mentioned an opportunity to restructure a portfolio that had been mismanaged by larger firms, echoing the very potential Sophia had identified. The synchronicity was not lost on her. Each hire reinforced her confidence that she was building not only a bank but a culture, a network of professionals committed to a shared vision and capable of executing it with precision. Simultaneously, Sophia developed operational systems that could scale without losing control. Minnie Hook. She discovered inefficiencies in standard banking software that allowed miscalculations to persist unnoticed. By designing internal checks and protocols, she ensured that her bank would operate with transparency, accuracy, and agility. She realized that discipline in operations was just as crucial as analytical skill in asset evaluation. Each process, each safeguard, was a testament to her meticulous approach and a bulwark against the mistakes and oversights she had observed in larger, less attentive institutions. In her personal reflection, Sophia acknowledged the weight of responsibility she had chosen to carry. Minnie Hook. She recalled the dismissive laughter of her father at a family gathering years before, when he had derided her ambitions as trivial. Those memories, once painful, had become fuel for her determination. She felt no desire for revenge. Her motivation was control, competence, and the creation of something enduring. Every decision, from staffing to operational protocol to client engagement, was guided by these principles. The bank was shaping up to be not only a financial institution, but a manifestation of her autonomy and vision. Sophia began initial communications with potential clients, carefully cultivating relationships and presenting the value proposition of her planned bank. Minnie Hook, one small business owner, previously ignored by larger banks, responded enthusiastically, highlighting the practical need for her approach. Each positive interaction reinforced her belief that the bank would fill a real gap in the market, validating the years of effort she had invested in honing her expertise and judgment. Meanwhile, she monitored regulatory requirements, ensuring that every aspect of her strategy complied with legal standards. Minnie Hook. A minor discrepancy in a licensing requirement nearly delayed a critical approval, but her preemptive attention to detail allowed her to correct it quickly. This moment reminded her that building an independent enterprise required foresight, patience, and relentless attention to detail, skills cultivated over years of silent preparation and disciplined work. Sophia also began to anticipate the reactions of her family, who remained unaware of the scale of her achievements. Minnie Hook. She imagined their surprise when they eventually learned that the quiet, undervalued daughter they had dismissed would now control significant assets and oversee an entire banking operation. The anticipation did not drive her. It was merely a sidebar to her work, a subtle measure of the distance she had traveled from dependence on their validation to complete professional autonomy. As the bank's incorporation process moved forward, Sophia coordinated with Richard Chen to secure initial funding, define leadership structures, and outline strategic goals. Mini Hook. During a board simulation exercise, she identified a potential risk in investment allocation and proposed a mitigation strategy that was immediately adopted. The seamless integration of her foresight into actionable plans reinforced her confidence and credibility, demonstrating that her leadership was both effective and decisive. Evenings in her apartment continued to be a mix of reflection, analysis, and meticulous planning. Mini Hook. She revisited the distressed asset portfolio and began to simulate acquisition scenarios, each yielding increasingly favorable projections. The blend of careful calculation and strategic intuition suggested that her vision was not only feasible, but highly likely to succeed if executed precisely. This exercise provided both validation and motivation, anchoring her in the confidence that she had cultivated through years of deliberate effort. By the end of the first quarter of preparation, Sophia had assembled a team, developed operational protocols, identified early clients, and secured preliminary regulatory approvals. Mini Hook, Richard Chen remarked in a brief meeting, "You've built something that can't fail because you've anticipated everything." The acknowledgement was subtle but deeply satisfying, reinforcing the sense that her competence had now translated into tangible, actionable leadership. Sophia recognized that she had transformed from a dismissed, undervalued young woman into a professional force capable of creating and managing a fully operational financial institution. The chapter closes with Sophia sitting at her kitchen table, late at night, reviewing the operational blueprints she had drafted. Mini Hook. She paused, reflecting on the years of silent preparation, the skill cultivated in invisibility, the competence honed through careful observation and disciplined work. She whispered to herself, "This is what independence feels like." The realization was profound. The foundation for her bank was laid, the path ahead clear, and the professional autonomy she had long sought was now within reach. The stage was set for the public and personal milestones yet to come, signaling the next phase of her journey from quiet diligence to high-profile recognition. By the time Sophia Anderson had spent a few years running her fledgling bank, she could feel the subtle shift in the professional world around her. The institution she and Richard Chen had painstakingly built was no longer a small operation operating in obscurity. It was a recognized entity in the financial community, gaining attention for its focus on underserved small businesses and its meticulous approach to risk and investment strategy. Mini Hook, a regional financial publication, featured a short article highlighting her role as a young, competent leader in an industry dominated by men, decades her senior. Sophia read it carefully, noting the language that emphasized her independence, discipline, and innovative approach. Her family, of course, remained unaware. The contrast was stark, and she allowed herself a quiet smile, savoring the difference between recognition earned and recognition assumed. Expansion became the immediate priority. Sophia and Richard began evaluating new service lines for their clients, considering small business lending, microloans, and technology-driven financial services that could streamline operations. Mini Hook. During a team meeting, a junior analyst pointed out inefficiencies in the firm's approach to evaluating small business credit risk that even seasoned colleagues had overlooked. Sophia immediately grasped the potential, integrating the insight into a revised operational model. This small recognition of detail would prove critical, reinforcing the bank's reputation for accuracy and forward-thinking strategy. Sophia also invested considerable time in professional networking. She attended industry conferences, not for show, but to learn, exchange ideas, and identify partnerships. Mini Hook. At one such conference, she observed a panel discussion about gaps in the lending market that perfectly mirrored the niche her bank occupied. She approached the panelists afterward, initiating conversations that would lead to partnerships and early-stage investments. These interactions were subtle victories, quietly extending the bank's reach and influence, while solidifying Sophia's credibility in the eyes of industry insiders. Each handshake, each shared insight, reinforced her position as a capable and respected professional. Even as her professional profile grew, Sophia remained acutely aware of the lingering shadows of her family's dismissal. Mini-hook. An unexpected text from Lila appeared midweek, asking what Sophia had been working on. Curious, perhaps cautiously interested. Sophia chose to answer vaguely, providing just enough information to acknowledge the inquiry without revealing the full scale of her achievements. The response was measured, a reminder that empowerment sometimes requires discretion. She reflected on the years of undervaluation she had endured, the sneers, the offhand comments, the cold laughter, and how those experiences had inadvertently equipped her with resilience, patience, and a sense of perspective few others her age possessed. The bank continued to expand its portfolio. Mini-hook. Sophia identified a previously overlooked set of small business accounts with hidden potential. She crafted a strategy for restructuring and optimizing these assets, presenting her plan to Richard and the senior team. The proposal was accepted with minimal modification, a testament to her analytical rigor and operational foresight. Each successful implementation reinforced the culture she was cultivating: meticulous, accountable, innovative, and disciplined. It became increasingly clear that Sophia's leadership style was shaping not only the success of the bank, but the careers and competencies of the employees she had recruited. Public recognition followed naturally. Mini-hook. Invitations to speak at smaller financial symposiums turned into requests to present at regional investment forums, and eventually at national conferences. Sophia's presentations were methodical yet engaging, grounded in real data and practical insights. Colleagues noted her clarity and composure, and industry professionals began to reach out directly for collaboration, consultation, or investment advice. Each opportunity further distanced her professional identity from the narrative her family had imposed, and each success reinforced her internal sense of self-worth and independence. Sophia also began mentoring younger professionals within the bank, creating a pipeline of talent trained to observe, analyze, and act with the same level of precision and diligence she had cultivated. Mini-hook, a junior analyst, identified a compliance anomaly in a new client account, which Sophia immediately recognized as critical, and she guided the resolution. This demonstrated the ripple effect of her leadership. Competence and empowerment were being passed along, embedding the bank's culture deeply. Her daily routine was rigorous and disciplined. Evenings were spent reviewing market trends, financial reports, and regulatory updates. Mini-hook. Sophia noticed a subtle pattern in an emerging sector, suggesting an untapped market segment. She began drafting a proposal for an innovative lending initiative that could position the bank as a front-runner in providing targeted financial services for niche businesses. Her foresight and strategic planning became increasingly sophisticated, reflecting the cumulative impact of years of disciplined study, practical experience, and observation. While her professional life flourished, Sophia's relationship with her family remained carefully managed. Mini-hook. Margaret called to ask casually about Sophia's work, her voice betraying a hint of genuine curiosity for the first time. Sophia provided measured answers, maintaining boundaries and control over the narrative. Jonathan remained stoic, his pride quietly bruised, while Lila observed from the sidelines, curiosity mingled with unease. Each interaction was a small test of power and perception, a subtle measure of how far Sophia had moved beyond their dismissive assumptions. The bank's expansion required continual innovation. Mini-hook. Sophia implemented a new technological platform to automate risk assessment and portfolio monitoring, increasing efficiency and accuracy. She trained her team personally, ensuring adherence to standards and protocols. These improvements not only enhanced operational performance, but also solidified her reputation as a competent, forward-thinking leader. Her attention to detail and insistence on excellence became hallmarks of her professional identity, setting the foundation for sustainable growth and industry respect. In quiet reflection, Sophia recognized the profound irony of her journey. Mini-hook, The same diligence, independence, and meticulous attention that had once been overlooked by her family now commanded the respect of clients, colleagues, and mentors. The external validation she received was gratifying, yet secondary to the internal sense of accomplishment and agency she had cultivated. Every successful project, every analytical insight, every strategic initiative reinforced the reality that she had become the architect of her own professional life, untethered from the judgments and biases that had once confined her. By the end of the chapter, Sophia had solidified her position as a recognized, capable leader within the financial sector. Mini Hook, a call from a regional investment consortium, hinted at a collaborative venture, offering the potential to expand the bank's reach beyond local operations. Sophia felt a thrill of anticipation, fully aware that this next step could position her institution and herself on a national stage. She reflected on the years of preparation, silent work, and incremental victories that had brought her to this point, recognizing that her empowerment was the product of sustained effort, strategy, and the deliberate cultivation of skill and independence. Sophia ended the week with a sense of measured satisfaction. She had created a bank that reflected her vision and discipline, a team aligned with her principles, and a growing recognition in the industry that could not be ignored. Mini Hook. She glanced at a note from Richard Chen highlighting an upcoming opportunity to oversee a multi-state portfolio, and she allowed herself a rare smile, knowing that her professional autonomy and empowerment had reached a new pinnacle. The foundations she had laid were solid, the trajectory upward, and the stage set for the opportunities, challenges, and recognitions that awaited in the chapters to come. Sophia Anderson checked her calendar again and felt a familiar tightening in her chest. The Charleston Charity Gala was only 2 weeks away, and she now knew that her father, mother, and sister would all be attending. Mini Hook. A subtle note from her assistant mentioned that her family had requested seating arrangements, unaware that Sophia would occupy a place of prominence. The thought sent a small thrill through her. Years of invisibility and dismissals were about to collide with the recognition she had earned through decades of effort. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and allowed herself a quiet moment to anticipate the tension that was already building, the unspoken confrontation that would unfold without a single word yet spoken. Reflecting on her family dynamics, Sophia could not help but think back to the countless dinners and gatherings of her youth. Mini Hook. She remembered the time her father, Jonathan, had deliberately highlighted her sister Lila's minor accomplishments, dismissing her own efforts with a perfunctory nod or silent glance. Her mother, Margaret, had always maintained her composure, deflecting attention and avoiding confrontation in a way that preserved her own comfort. Sophia had spent years learning to read the room, to navigate this invisible hierarchy, and to recognize the subtle cues of approval and disregard. Each experience, painful as it was, had honed her emotional awareness and prepared her for the delicate balance of visibility and power she now commanded in her professional life. Sophia opened her laptop and reviewed the guest list for the gala, noting the names of industry leaders, philanthropists, and potential clients. Mini Hook. A few high-profile investors had requested her presence at the pre-event briefing, unaware that her family would also be present. She could anticipate the collision of two worlds, the personal and the professional, and she savored the controlled anticipation. She knew that this moment was not about revenge. It was about truth emerging, about her presence being acknowledged exactly as it deserved. The thought was invigorating, a subtle reminder of the distance she had traveled from the dismissed daughter she had once been. In the days leading up to the gala, Sophia began meticulous preparations. Mini Hook, Richard Chen, her mentor and business partner, sent a note reminding her of subtle cues to ensure that her achievements would be recognized without unnecessary spectacle. They discussed timing, introductions, and how to navigate the delicate balance of professional visibility and family observation. Sophia appreciated the foresight, knowing that the choreography of attention could make the difference between a quiet acknowledgement and a moment of public revelation. Each detail she attended to reflected not just strategic thinking, but the lessons of patience, discipline, and composure she had cultivated over years of careful observation. Sophia also reviewed past interactions with her family to anticipate their reactions. Minnie Hook. She recalled Lila's smirks, Jonathan's condescending tone, and Margaret's habitual avoidance during previous social gatherings. She envisioned the ways these patterns might manifest at the gala and considered her own responses, planning to maintain composure while allowing the truth of her achievements to emerge organically. In her mind, the gala became a stage for subtle power shifts, a space where her years of preparation would confront their assumptions in a way they could not easily dismiss. She spent afternoons walking through Charleston, letting her mind drift over scenarios and outcomes. Minnie Hook. Observing the city streets, she noticed parallels between her professional environment and the intricate social dynamics of her family: attention, influence, hierarchy, and recognition. Each observation reinforced her strategy: maintain calm, assert competence, and allow subtle cues to guide perception. Sophia understood that the family's awareness was growing, but it would not define the moment. Her preparation ensured that when the collision occurred, it would be with control and dignity, not with impulsive emotion. In her apartment, she rehearsed responses to possible questions and scenarios. Minnie Hook. She imagined Lila asking about her work, her father attempting to assert authority through casual remarks, and her mother observing silently. Each potential interaction was a rehearsal in power dynamics and subtle authority. Sophia noted that her emotional readiness was as important as any professional preparation. She had built a life that could not be ignored, and she intended to ensure that her family saw it, even if only through observation at first. Sophia also reflected on the contrast between her family's ignorance and the recognition she had earned in the professional world. Minnie Hook, a recent article in a regional financial journal, praised her innovative approach to small business lending, yet her family remained unaware of her achievements. The disparity was striking, and she allowed herself a quiet satisfaction. It was not vindictive, but it was a recognition of the journey she had undertaken, the years of quiet work, discipline, and strategic thinking that had brought her to this point. Each success, each acknowledgement outside the family, was a validation of her competence and independence. As the gala approached, Sophia reviewed the seating arrangements, ensuring that her position would be prominent yet natural. Minnie Hook. Subtle adjustments suggested by Richard Chen indicated that family attention would be drawn without overt confrontation. Sophia appreciated the strategy. The moment of recognition needed to feel inevitable, not orchestrated. She reviewed her talking points, focusing on clarity, impact, and composure, knowing that her presence and professional stature would speak as loudly as any words she might deliver. Every detail, from posture to expression, was considered to maximize both professional visibility and the subtle impact on her family. Evenings before the event were spent in reflection and preparation. Minnie Hook. A short message from one of the firm's clients hinted at a potential collaboration that could expand the bank's portfolio significantly. The opportunity reminded Sophia that while family attention was emotionally charged, her professional trajectory and achievements were equally compelling and independent of their perception. She focused on the intersection of these two worlds, understanding that the gala would be a controlled stage where personal history and professional reality would converge. The night before the gala, Sophia reviewed all possible scenarios, imagining the micro-reactions of her father, mother, and sister. Minnie Hook. She recalled Lila's skeptical glance during a past family gathering, her father's dismissive smirk, and her mother's habitual withdrawal. Each memory was catalogued, not as a source of resentment, but as a tool for strategic anticipation. Sophia recognized the power in preparation. She had cultivated both professional competence and emotional intelligence, allowing her to navigate high-pressure situations with control and awareness. On the morning of the gala, Sophia dressed with deliberate precision, choosing attire that signaled professionalism, competence, and subtle authority. Minnie Hook. As she adjusted her blazer, she caught a glance of her reflection and felt the quiet pride of independence, the sense that she had earned every opportunity and recognition without the need for validation from those who had long dismissed her. She packed notes, financial summaries, and talking points, aware that the night ahead would test both her composure and the subtle influence she had cultivated over the years. The drive to Charleston was quiet, filled with reflection. Minnie Hook. Passing familiar streets, Sophia allowed herself to remember the countless moments of invisibility, the quiet dismissals, and the lessons learned in patience, observation, and resilience. Each memory reinforced her purpose. The gala was not about proving her worth to her family, but about stepping fully into the role she had earned, visible and undeniable. She arrived at the venue with calm determination, ready to navigate the collision of personal history and professional accomplishment with poise. Entering the gala, Sophia noted the elegance of the space. Chandeliers glittering above, guests in formal attire, and the low hum of polite conversation. Minnie Hook. She saw her family seated at a distance, unaware of her prominence, yet curiosity flickered in their eyes. The moment was suspended between anticipation and inevitability, a stage she had been preparing for quietly for years. Every detail, from her posture to her gaze, was aligned to communicate composure, authority, and readiness. The gala, with all its lights and scrutiny, was merely a venue. Sophia was fully prepared to make her presence, her competence, and her independence undeniable. The chapter closes with Sophia stepping into the room fully aware that the evening ahead would challenge old perceptions, test composure, and ultimately reveal the reality of her accomplishments. Minnie Hook. She whispered to herself, "This is the moment where everything begins to change," anticipating the subtle confrontations and shifts in attention that would set the stage for the public revelation to come in the following chapters. Sophia Anderson stepped out of the sleek black car and onto the cobblestone entrance of the Charleston Charity Gala, her heels clicking softly against the stones. The evening air was warm, scented faintly with magnolias from the gardens beyond, but Sophia barely noticed. Her focus was on the subtle tension that pulsed in her chest. Her father, Jonathan, her mother, Margaret, and her sister, Lila, were already inside, unaware of the prominence Sophia now commanded. Minnie Hook. A fleeting glance from a nearby valet hinted that the family had inquired about her seating, oblivious to the fact that Sophia would be positioned front and center among the gala's distinguished honorees. As she walked into the grand hall, her eyes scanned the crowd. 300 guests, a mix of financial industry leaders, philanthropists, and local dignitaries, were mingling beneath towering crystal chandeliers. Minnie Hook. A familiar face from her early internships approached to exchange pleasantries, further reinforcing that she had earned a place in this professional world entirely independent of her family's recognition. Sophia's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the quiet thrill of anticipation. She was about to step into a room where perception and reality would begin their inevitable collision. Sophia noticed her family immediately. Jonathan stood tall, exuding the confident authority he had perfected over decades, conversing with influential guests as if he controlled the room. Margaret smiled politely at someone beside her, her hands clasped nervously, betraying a subtle tension. Lila leaned slightly forward, an expression of curiosity and incredulity flickering across her features as she scanned the room. Minnie Hook. Sophia could sense the micro-shifts in attention. Their perception of her had not yet caught up with the reality of her achievements, but the gap was narrowing. She moved toward a group of colleagues near the center of the room, exchanging greetings and polite smiles, yet keeping a deliberate awareness of her family. Minnie Hook. A senior client approached, remarking on a recent successful portfolio restructuring led by Sophia. Their attention and approval were silent confirmations of her competence, a contrast so sharp against her family's historical dismissals that it was almost palpable. Sophia allowed herself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the power she had cultivated in her professional sphere would soon intersect with the family dynamic in unexpected ways. Sophia's gaze returned to her family. Jonathan's expression remained confident, but she noticed a subtle furrow in his brow as he glimpsed her moving through the room. Margaret's hand trembled lightly around her wine glass as she observed Sophia's composed interactions. Lila's eyes widened slightly, betraying an internal recognition that something had shifted, even if she did not yet understand its full extent. Mini-hook. These micro-reactions were tiny, almost imperceptible signals of a recalibration in real time, a prelude to the revelation that would eventually unfold. She approached the podium area to confirm final preparations with Richard Chen, her mentor and partner. Mini-hook. His subtle nod conveyed both reassurance and anticipation. He had orchestrated the visibility of the evening so that Sophia's accomplishments would be evident to all, including her family, without requiring her to announce them prematurely. This quiet alignment between professional strategy and personal empowerment had taken months of careful planning and reflection. Sophia felt a deep sense of trust, knowing that when the moment arrived, her narrative would be communicated precisely as intended. Sophia then circled the room, engaging with various guests and discussing topics ranging from portfolio strategies to small business financing. Mini-hook. Each interaction reinforced her credibility, clients sought her insight, colleagues deferred to her judgment, and the subtle authority she had cultivated became increasingly visible. The attention she commanded from outsiders contrasted sharply with the oblivious composure her family maintained, highlighting the slow, imperceptible shift in dynamics that Sophia had been anticipating for years. As she navigated the room, Sophia observed patterns in the social landscape. Mini-hook. A conversation between two clients shifted mid-sentence as Sophia approached, their focus temporarily redirected, underscoring her growing influence. Simultaneously, she noticed Lila attempting to interject into a discussion, only to be subtly redirected, hinting at the subtle power shift that was already underway. Margaret's eyes followed Sophia, a mixture of polite interest and unease evident in her expression. Jonathan continued his networking, but his peripheral glances betrayed an awareness that his control over the room, and over the perception of Sophia, was beginning to erode. Sophia paused near a display table, reviewing her notes and mentally rehearsing how the evening would unfold. Mini-hook. She reflected on the years of quiet preparation, the internships, the part-time projects, and the meticulous building of her professional reputation. Each accomplishment, once invisible to her family, was now amplified by the attention and respect of her peers. She felt a sense of quiet triumph, a satisfaction rooted not in revenge, but in the inevitability of truth asserting itself in the space she had claimed through diligence and discipline. During the early stages of the gala program, Sophia monitored the interactions between her family and other guests. Mini-hook. She noticed Jonathan subtly trying to steer conversations in ways that would reassert his perceived authority, Margaret carefully observing without engagement, and Lila shifting in her seat with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Each movement was a clue to the underlying tension, a silent acknowledgement that Sophia's presence, competence, and prominence were starting to disrupt their long-held perceptions. The prelude to the evening's main presentations began, and Sophia took her position near the stage, observing the room with practiced composure. Mini-hook. Whispers circulated as guests began to recognize her accomplishments, some recalling the articles and awards she had recently received. The attention she commanded was no longer subtle. It was unmistakable, and the reactions of her family, though muted, began to reflect the first cracks in their assumptions. Sophia allowed herself a small, private smile, understanding that these were the quiet moments before the full impact of recognition would unfold. Sophia's interaction with Richard Chen was brief but significant. Mini-hook. He handed her a small set of notes highlighting subtle cues for visibility and engagement, ensuring that when the family's attention inevitably turned toward her, it would be impossible to ignore her achievements. The timing, positioning, and strategy had all been meticulously planned, and Sophia felt a sense of calm certainty. She was no longer operating under the shadow of familial dismissal. She was the orchestrator of her own narrative, poised to claim the recognition that had long been withheld. As the first speeches began, Sophia circulated among guests, engaging in light conversation and demonstrating the poise she had cultivated over years of preparation. Minnie Hook. She observed subtle signs of shifting attention, clients turning toward her commentary, colleagues seeking her insight, and family members increasingly aware of her presence. Each micro-reaction reinforced the impending collision of personal and professional worlds, a collision that Sophia had anticipated and prepared for with precision. Toward the end of the early segments of the gala, Sophia positioned herself at the front of the room near the podium, ready for the spotlight to transition from casual acknowledgement to formal recognition. Minnie Hook. Her family's glances became more frequent, Lila's curiosity tempered by hesitation, Margaret's polite composure edged with nervous tension, Jonathan's confident demeanor subtly faltering in response to her visible prominence. The stage was set, the room's attention was shifting, and the narrative that had long excluded her was quietly, irrevocably beginning to change. Sophia took a deep breath, allowing herself a brief moment to reflect on the years of preparation that had led to this point. Minnie Hook. The anticipation was electric, a subtle blend of professional accomplishment and personal history. She had cultivated discipline, insight, and resilience, and now the room, her family included, was poised to witness the reality she had quietly constructed. Her presence alone spoke volumes, a silent assertion of authority, competence, and self-worth that no words from the past could diminish. The chapter closes with Sophia observing the final preparations before the main presentations begin, fully aware that the evening ahead would test the perceptions of her family, while highlighting the professional respect and recognition she had earned. Minnie Hook. She whispered to herself, "This is the beginning of the moment they can't ignore," anticipating the subtle confrontations, shifts in attention, and the eventual public acknowledgement that would define the next stage of her journey. Sophia Anderson walked further into the gala hall, the polished marble floor reflecting the glittering chandeliers above. She felt the weight of the room, the collective attention of hundreds of distinguished guests shifting subtly as she moved. Minnie Hook. A few familiar clients exchanged glances, noting her presence, and she could feel the quiet ripple of curiosity flowing toward her family. Jonathan, her father, stood near the back, attempting casual conversation with influential guests, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty as they landed on Sophia. Margaret, her mother, maintained her practiced smile, though her fingers twisted nervously around the stem of her wine glass. Lila, her sister, leaned slightly forward, a spark of recognition mixed with hesitation, and Sophia noted the first signs of internal questioning in her sibling. Sophia paused briefly near a display of the evening's charitable work, letting the atmosphere settle around her. Minnie Hook. She noticed a guest subtly shifting attention, whispering to another about her recent accomplishments in small business finance. It was a quiet acknowledgement, invisible to most, but Sophia recognized it as part of the slow recalibration she had anticipated. The room was a microcosm of the professional world she had built, a space where competence and visibility mattered, and she had finally claimed her position at the center. The contrast between the respect she commanded here and the dismissals she had endured in her family was stark, and she allowed herself a controlled smile, savoring the anticipation of what was yet to unfold. Moving toward the front of the room, Sophia engaged briefly with colleagues and clients, exchanging pleasantries and discussing the progress of various portfolios and upcoming projects. Minnie Hook. One client remarked on the precision of a recent financial report she had overseen, an acknowledgement that her family remained unaware of. Each interaction reinforced the growing awareness of her presence, her professional authority, and the subtle power she had accrued. Sophia's attention remained divided, however, as she observed the behavior of her family, noting micro-expressions, posture, and the occasional glance of curiosity. Jonathan's confident exterior masked a subtle tension. Margaret's composure was taut with unease, and Lila's attempts at casual observation revealed an unmistakable engagement with the reality Sophia embodied. The gala program began to move toward its main presentations, and Sophia positioned herself near the podium, her posture poised and confident. "Minnie Hook." Whispers circulated among guests, hinting that they had noticed her achievements and were curious about her involvement in the bank's recent successes. She noted each subtle shift in attention, recognizing the dynamics at play as a careful interplay between professional recognition and familial observation. Her presence alone began to command consideration, a stark contrast to the years of invisibility she had endured. The anticipation of her family, unaware of the prominence she now held, created a tension that rippled across the room in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Sophia's gaze returned to Jonathan. "Minnie Hook." He leaned slightly toward a colleague, his voice lowered, attempting to project composure while monitoring her movements. The precision of his control, perfected over decades, was encountering the unyielding reality of her achievements. Margaret, standing beside him, maintained a polite smile, but the subtle tremor in her hands betrayed her awareness of the shift in dynamics. Lila fidgeted in her seat, a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and unease crossing her features. Sophia allowed herself a moment to appreciate the interplay of perception and reality, the long shadow of family dismissal now intersecting with undeniable professional competence. As the early speeches concluded, Sophia moved to engage with a small group of industry leaders who had previously consulted her during project reviews. "Minnie Hook." One senior investor remarked on the strategic foresight she had demonstrated, a quiet commendation that would resonate through the network long after the evening ended. Each acknowledgement reinforced her autonomy and competence, serving as a counterbalance to the subtle scrutiny from her family. She realized that the anticipation she had cultivated over weeks, studying micro-expressions, predicting reactions, and positioning herself strategically, was paying off. The room's attention, once diffuse, was now converging in a way that mirrored the careful orchestration she had envisioned. Sophia then focused on a private exchange with Richard Chen, Minnie Hook. He passed her a small set of cues, reminders of key clients to acknowledge, and subtle gestures to maintain visibility while allowing the family's observation to unfold naturally. The precision of this coordination was emblematic of the professional rigor she had cultivated over years. Sophia nodded, internalizing each instruction, aware that the upcoming moments would test her ability to navigate complex social dynamics with composure and authority. The balance between professional prominence and family perception had never been more critical, and she felt a quiet confidence in her readiness. Throughout the next hour, Sophia circulated, engaging in discussions that reinforced her expertise while subtly drawing attention from her family. Minnie Hook. Lila attempted to interject into a conversation regarding portfolio strategy, only to be gracefully redirected by Sophia's composed responses, demonstrating the subtle shift in influence. Jonathan glanced toward her repeatedly, a subtle furrow in his brow, betraying his awareness that the narrative he had long controlled was beginning to shift. Margaret's polite engagement with other guests occasionally faltered, as she observed the deference Sophia received from respected industry figures. Sophia observed these dynamics with a calm, deliberate focus. Minnie Hook. She noted a small cluster of attendees exchanging glances, whispering discreetly about her recent accomplishments and influence in the banking sector. The acknowledgement was quiet but unmistakable, further highlighting the contrast between her professional standing and the outdated perceptions held by her family. Each micro-expression, each subtle gesture, was a testament to the years of preparation and discipline that had positioned her at the center of attention, ready for the recognition that had long been withheld. The gala program moved closer to the main award segment, and Sophia positioned herself to the side of the podium, ensuring that her presence was visible without being obtrusive. Mini hook. A conversation between two senior investors paused as they noted her proximity, their attention drawn naturally to her composed demeanor and professional poise. The room's dynamics were shifting subtly, aligning with the orchestration she had envisioned with Richard Chen. She could sense the anticipation building, the subtle recalibration of attention, and the impending collision of familial perception and professional reality. Sophia reflected quietly on the years that had led to this moment. Minnie Hook, the dismissive comments of her father, the offhand remarks of her sister, and her mother's habitual avoidance had all been lessons in patience, observation, and resilience. Each memory reinforced her ability to navigate the current environment with composure and strategic awareness. She understood that the evening was not about revenge, but about allowing reality to assert itself, letting the professional authority she had earned stand in contrast to the outdated assumptions of her family. As the first award presentations concluded, Sophia moved to engage briefly with a few guests, answering questions with clarity and precision. Mini hook. One investor inquired about her strategic approach to small business lending, and her articulate, data-driven response drew subtle nods of approval. Her professional credibility was unmistakable, and she could see the first signs of acknowledgement creeping into her family's awareness. Jonathan's glances were more frequent, Margaret's composed smile showed subtle tension, and Lila's curiosity edged toward uncertainty. The chapter closes with Sophia standing near the podium, ready for the transition into the main segment of the gala where recognition and visibility would be at their peak. Mini hook. She whispered to herself, everything is about to align, fully aware that the careful preparation, strategic positioning, and years of disciplined growth had set the stage for the moments where professional recognition and familial perception would intersect, laying the groundwork for the public revelation to come in the next chapter. The room fell into an uneasy hush as Jonathan Anderson, confident as ever in his role as the family patriarch, leaned into the microphone with that practiced smirk. "Get out of here, you beggar," he said, his words cutting through the low hum of conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. The statement carried the same dismissive weight it had at countless family gatherings over the years, yet this time it reverberated differently. Mini hook, 300 guests, well-dressed and attentive, froze mid-murmur, sensing the unexpected tension. Lila, standing nearby, added with a cruel casualness, "I wish I'd never been your sibling," her tone sharp and familiar. Margaret, their mother, shifted uneasily, her eyes darting away as if looking at the floor could somehow protect her from the unfolding confrontation. Sophia stood poised, composed, the calm cultivated over decades anchoring her presence. Mini hook. Every muscle in her body was alert, but she was not intimidated. She could feel the familiar sting of dismissals past, yet the weight fell differently now. This time, she had prepared, had built a life whose scale and significance could not be minimized by casual words. Across the room, Richard Chen, CEO and longtime partner, observed the scene with quiet patience. He had orchestrated the evening to highlight Sophia's achievements subtly, yet unmistakably. His presence signaled that the narrative was about to shift irrevocably, and Sophia was ready. Richard stepped forward, clearing his throat as the room adjusted to his quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly over the sudden stillness. "Before we continue, there's something you need to understand about the person I am about to recognize tonight." Mini hook. The air seemed to suspend itself, conversations evaporating as every eye turned toward him. Sophia could feel the shift in attention, from casual observation to focused scrutiny, her family included. The dynamics she had studied and anticipated for weeks were now unfolding in real time. "The woman I am about to honor," Richard continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, briefly pausing at Jonathan and Lila, has built something extraordinary through her own vision, discipline, and determination. She has never sought recognition or demanded validation. She has simply done the work, consistently and meticulously, until the impact of her achievements became undeniable. Minnie Hook. Murmurs rippled through the audience, subtle but palpable, as the words sank in. Faces turned, eyes widened, and a few guests caught themselves mid-breath, processing the revelation that a seemingly unassuming presence had quietly amassed remarkable influence. Sophia stepped forward, the attention of the room converging on her. Minnie Hook. The shift in family perception was immediate, though subtle. Jonathan's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Margaret's composed demeanor wavered, a hand brushing lightly against her throat in a gesture of surprise. Lila froze, caught between disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement, realizing that the sister she had underestimated was the very person Richard was highlighting. The room's energy shifted, a tangible realignment of attention and expectation, and Sophia allowed herself a quiet, internal acknowledgement of the journey that had led her here. Richard extended his hand, guiding Sophia toward the podium. "Please welcome," he said, "Sophia Anderson, Forbes-honored founder and billionaire of this bank, my partner, and one of the finest financial minds I have ever had the privilege to work with." Minnie Hook. Applause erupted, filling the room with a collective recognition that contrasted sharply with the private dismissals of her family. Sophia's posture remained composed, her movements deliberate, every step reinforcing the authority and presence she had cultivated over years of disciplined work. Standing at the podium, Sophia surveyed the audience, her gaze briefly landing on her family. Minnie Hook. She noted Jonathan's rigid posture, Lila's conflicted expression, and Margaret's tears glistening in her eyes. She began to speak, her voice steady and measured, reflecting the inner strength developed over decades of undervaluation. "I have learned that worth is not always recognized by those closest to us," she said, her words cutting through the polite applause and shifting murmurs. "Families can love us yet fail to see us. They can provide materially while leaving the intangible unacknowledged. But what I have built, through discipline, focus, and vision, cannot be diminished by the opinions of those who chose not to see it." Minnie Hook. She recounted her professional journey succinctly, highlighting her meticulous attention to portfolio management, the founding of her bank, and the development of a team committed to integrity and innovation. The audience listened intently, colleagues and clients acknowledging with nods, while her family absorbed each revelation with mounting awareness. Sophia's narrative was not one of revenge, but of truth finally manifesting, an unassailable alignment between effort, skill, and recognition. As she spoke, Sophia noticed the micro-reactions around the room. Minnie Hook. Whispers traveled, glances exchanged, subtle acknowledgments of her expertise and leadership circulated among clients and peers. Jonathan's expression oscillated between confusion and incredulity. Margaret's eyes glimmered with a mix of pride and regret. Lila's face betrayed the internal struggle of reconciling the sister she thought she knew, with the formidable professional standing now undeniable. Every word Sophia delivered reinforced the reality that her achievements were substantial, and her family's long-held perceptions were no longer sufficient to contain them. Sophia continued, her speech weaving professional accomplishments with personal insight. Minnie Hook. She addressed the audience directly, emphasizing the value of perseverance, discipline, and self-reliance. "The work I have done is not merely for recognition," she said, "but because it mattered, because it created impact. And in that work, I found validation that no dismissive words could ever diminish." The statement resonated with guests who had observed her journey quietly, and the subtle energy in the room shifted from polite acknowledgement to genuine admiration. Throughout her address, Sophia maintained a careful balance of authority and composure. Minnie Hook. She shared brief anecdotes illustrating her journey, spotting overlooked opportunities, guiding a distressed portfolio to success, and mentoring her team, without turning the speech into self-aggrandizement. Each detail reinforced the credibility she had meticulously earned, a contrast to the family's historical undervaluation. The audience, aware of the subtle dynamics, responded with increasingly sustained applause, acknowledging both her professional expertise and the quiet triumph of her journey. Sophia then paused, allowing the room to absorb the weight of her words. Minnie Hook. She met her family's eyes directly, letting the significance of her accomplishments register without needing to elaborate. Jonathan's composure faltered slightly, Lila's curiosity turned to reluctant respect, and Margaret's hand trembled with the realization of what had gone unrecognized for so many years. The tension in the room crystallized, a blend of recognition, astonishment, and re-evaluation, marking the moment when the narrative her father had long controlled was irrevocably shifted. The final portion of Sophia's speech focused on broader empowerment and insight. Minnie Hook. She addressed not just the professional audience, but also anyone listening, particularly those who had experienced undervaluation or dismissal. Your worth is determined by the impact you create, the diligence you cultivate, and the integrity with which you act, she said. Recognition may come late, it may be delayed, but the work itself, when done with purpose, is undeniable. Her words carried weight, resonating across the room and reinforcing her authority, self-worth, and independence. As the applause swelled, Sophia stepped back slightly from the podium, allowing the audience's recognition to settle around her. Minnie Hook. She noticed Richard Chen observing from the side, a subtle nod of approval acknowledging the success of the orchestration and her delivery. The family, now fully aware of the scope of her achievements, remained seated, absorbing the revelation with complex, unreadable expressions. The narrative shift was complete. The professional and personal spheres had intersected, and Sophia had emerged fully visible, empowered, and recognized. The chapter closes with Sophia moving away from the podium, the energy of the room still directed toward her. Minnie Hook. She allowed herself a brief, private smile, understanding that the moment was a culmination of years of preparation, discipline, and strategic growth. Her family had finally seen the truth of who she had become, not through confrontation, but through undeniable presence and achievement. The stage was set for the aftermath, where internal reflection, family recalibration, and continued professional growth would unfold in the chapters to come. Sophia Anderson stepped away from the podium, the applause still ringing in her ears, and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The room remained alive with the murmur of conversation, but her focus shifted inward, reflecting on the magnitude of what had just occurred. Minnie Hook. Her father, Jonathan, remained seated, his confident demeanor fractured by disbelief. Her mother, Margaret, dabbed discreetly at her eyes, caught between pride and regret. And Lila, her sister, fidgeted nervously, processing the revelation that the sibling she had casually dismissed was now the center of attention. Sophia felt no need for triumph, only a deep, resonant calm that came from years of preparation, discipline, and the quiet accumulation of competence. Returning to a quieter corner of the gala, Sophia observed the room through a new lens. Minnie Hook. Colleagues and clients approached to congratulate her on the bank's performance and her strategic insight. Each handshake, each nod reinforced the professional recognition she had earned, validation that was tangible, earned, and independent of familial acknowledgement. She allowed herself to note the contrast between this acknowledgement and the casual dismissals of her father, the subtle undermining from Lila, and the habitual avoidance of Margaret. The disparity underscored a simple truth she had carried for decades: recognition from those who failed to see you cannot define your value. Sophia recalled the journey that had brought her to this point. Minnie Hook. Flashbacks flitted through her mind, late nights spent analyzing portfolios, the countless spreadsheets she had created to track every variable, her meticulous preparation for internships, and the quiet victories that went unnoticed by her family. She thought of the first portfolio she had analyzed independently, the small triumphs of her early presentations, and the mentorship she had received from Richard Chen, whose guidance had always been subtle, patient, and precise. Each memory reinforced the foundation of her professional authority and her internal sense of self-worth. She paused to reflect on the family dynamics that had shaped her. Minnie Hook. Jonathan's dismissive words, Lila's casual cruelty, and Margaret's strategic invisibility had once been obstacles, but now they were lessons in observation, patience, and resilience. The gala had provided the stage for a subtle recalibration of attention and perception, but the internal empowerment Sophia had cultivated over years was the true achievement. She recognized that the applause, while gratifying, was secondary to the quiet assurance that her skills, judgment, and vision were undeniable. Sophia allowed herself to observe her family more closely. Minnie Hook. Jonathan tried to reassert composure, leaning into a conversation with a guest while his eyes repeatedly flicked toward Sophia. Margaret's polite smile was tinged with tension, a visible indication of her processing the implications of the evening. Lila's hands twisted nervously, and her eyes darted back and forth, betraying the cognitive dissonance of reconciling her old assumptions with the reality she now faced. Each micro-expression was a subtle acknowledgement of the shift in dynamics, and Sophia noted them with a calm awareness born of years spent reading between the lines. The evening progressed, and Sophia engaged with several key clients and colleagues in discussions about future collaborations and strategic planning. Minnie Hook. One investor expressed interest in an international project, seeking her input and leadership. The interaction reinforced Sophia's professional credibility and autonomy, while subtly reminding her family that her achievements were not ephemeral or confined to local recognition. Every interaction underscored the separation between familial perception and professional reality, emphasizing that her competence commanded respect independently of any endorsement from her parents or sister. Later, Sophia found a quiet moment with Richard Chen. Minnie Hook. He commended her for the poise and authority she had displayed, noting the subtle but undeniable shift in attention and perception. The exchange was brief, yet meaningful, reinforcing that the orchestration of visibility, recognition, and timing had been executed flawlessly. Sophia absorbed the acknowledgement, not as external validation, but as confirmation that her strategy, discipline, and careful preparation had paid off, solidifying her professional authority in a tangible way. Sophia spent time reflecting on the broader implications of the evening. Minnie Hook. She recognized that the family's perception, long-formed and resistant to change, had been challenged not through confrontation, but through the undeniable evidence of her achievements. The public nature of the recognition ensured that the narrative could no longer be controlled by Jonathan or misinterpreted by Lila or Margaret. She felt a profound sense of closure, an emotional release tempered by the awareness that long-term shifts in perception would require patience and observation. In a quieter corner of the venue, Sophia reviewed the evening's events and considered next steps. Minnie Hook, invitations to participate in high-level industry panels, speaking engagements, and consultations for large clients were already accumulating, reflecting the ripple effect of her visible achievements. Each opportunity reinforced that her professional trajectory was self-determined, independent of the family dynamic that had once constrained her confidence. She allowed herself a moment of private satisfaction, acknowledging that the work itself, and the competence demonstrated through it, was the foundation of her empowerment. Sophia's thoughts turned to the micro-interactions with her family over the evening. Minnie Hook. Margaret approached briefly to inquire about a portfolio, her voice tinged with tentative pride. Jonathan attempted a casual conversation, testing the waters of acknowledgement, and Lila, hesitant, asked for clarification on a strategic decision she had heard about earlier. Each interaction was carefully navigated by Sophia, who responded with measured information, maintaining authority while allowing her family a chance to adjust to the new reality. This subtle balance of engagement and control exemplified her mastery of both professional and personal dynamics. The reflection continued as Sophia considered the journey from her first internship to the current moment. Mini hook. She remembered discovering overlooked discrepancies in client portfolios, mentoring junior analysts, and slowly building the bank's reputation through competence and careful strategic decision-making. Each step, each small victory, had compounded over time, creating a platform that was robust, credible, and entirely independent of familial approval. The realization provided an internal validation that eclipsed any external acknowledgement, reinforcing her sense of agency. Sophia took a quiet walk along the balcony outside the hall, observing the city lights of Charleston stretching into the night. Mini hook. She reflected on the journey she had undertaken, years of meticulous planning, disciplined execution, and strategic foresight, and recognized the unique satisfaction of seeing her life's work acknowledged on a public stage. She understood that while her family might take time to recalibrate their perceptions, her authority, competence, and recognition were now firmly established and unassailable. As the gala continued inside, Sophia returned to her seat, mentally preparing for the remaining engagements of the evening. Mini hook. She noted the subtle shifts in conversation patterns around her, colleagues and clients increasingly referencing her analyses and insights, family members observing with cautious awareness. The evening had not only solidified her professional standing, but had also initiated the delicate process of shifting familial perception, a process that would continue long after the applause had faded. The chapter closed with Sophia seated quietly, sipping water and watching the room with measured attention. Mini hook. She allowed herself a private acknowledgement of her empowerment and the subtle impact of her strategic presence. The evening had validated years of discipline, resilience, and competence. Her family had been confronted with undeniable evidence of her accomplishments, yet Sophia remained composed, aware that true recognition and self-worth derived from her own agency. She whispered to herself, "This is the beginning of the next chapter." Fully aware that professional growth and familial recalibration would continue in parallel, setting the stage for ongoing empowerment and long-term achievement. Sophia Anderson arrived at her office the morning after the gala with a quiet sense of clarity. The previous night's events still echoed in her mind, the subtle shift in her family's attention, the realization in their eyes that the person they had long dismissed was no longer invisible. Mini hook. A brief message from Margaret appeared on her phone, politely inquiring about the bank's latest quarterly report. Sophia read it carefully, choosing to respond with measured professionalism, providing sufficient information while maintaining the boundaries she had worked so hard to establish. The subtle power dynamics were already shifting, but Sophia knew that the long-term balance required patience, observation, and continued composure. In the early hours, she reviewed her team's progress, evaluating the performance metrics for several new initiatives. Mini hook. A client had flagged an opportunity in a regional microloan portfolio that had previously been overlooked by larger institutions. Sophia immediately recognized the potential and devised a strategy for leveraging the assets efficiently, ensuring that her team was aligned and prepared. Each small success reinforced the structural foundation of the bank, demonstrating the tangible impact of her meticulous planning, disciplined execution, and leadership. The contrast between this recognition and the dismissive attitudes of her family highlighted the independence she had cultivated over the years. As the morning progressed, Sophia coordinated with Richard Chen on strategic planning for an international expansion initiative. Mini hook. Richard outlined potential regulatory hurdles, investment partnerships, and operational challenges, all of which Sophia had anticipated and prepared for. Their collaboration was seamless, a result of years of mutual trust, complementary skills, and shared vision. Sophia's ability to synthesize complex financial data and translate it into actionable strategy solidified her professional authority, creating a clear demarcation between earned recognition and the assumptions of her family. Later, she received a call from Jonathan, her father. Minnie Hook. His voice was cautious, hesitant, as he asked detailed questions about the bank's operations and her recent projects. Sophia listened attentively, responding concisely and firmly, providing insight without over-explaining. She recognized the underlying attempt to gauge her competence while subtly asserting influence. Maintaining composure, she allowed him limited access to information, demonstrating both professionalism and the strategic use of boundaries. Each interaction was a reminder that empowerment involved not only achievement but also the careful management of perception and authority. Margaret, her mother, followed with a tentative text message, complimenting her professionalism and asking for guidance on a minor philanthropic initiative linked to the bank. Minnie Hook. Sophia provided clear, thoughtful advice, reinforcing the shift in dynamics. Her mother's tentative approach reflected a newfound awareness of Sophia's agency and competence, tempered by years of prior assumptions. Sophia felt a quiet satisfaction, recognizing that familial acknowledgement, while gratifying, was not essential to her self-worth or professional validation. Meanwhile, Lila reached out indirectly, expressing curiosity about specific operational procedures she had observed at the gala. Minnie Hook, Sophia answered with precision, conveying both expertise and subtle authority, highlighting the professional growth and competence that Lila had underestimated for years. Each measured response served as a lesson in boundary setting and strategic influence, reinforcing the subtle recalibration of familial perception without overt confrontation. The microshifts in attention, acknowledgement, and respect were unfolding exactly as Sophia had anticipated. Throughout the day, Sophia continued her oversight of the bank's expansion initiatives, reviewing client portfolios, mentoring analysts, and ensuring operational integrity. Minnie Hook. She identified a previously unnoticed discrepancy in a small business loan assessment and implemented corrective measures, illustrating her hands-on approach to maintaining excellence. The ripple effect of her decisions was immediate. Client satisfaction improved, team confidence increased, and operational efficiency was enhanced. These accomplishments, entirely independent of her family's perception, reinforced the internal validation she had long cultivated. By mid-afternoon, Sophia took a moment to reflect privately. Minnie Hook. She recalled the dismissive laughter of her father at past family gatherings, the subtle undermining from Lila, and her mother's habitual avoidance. Each memory, once a source of pain, had become a tool for resilience and strategic foresight. She realized that the empowerment she now wielded was not simply the product of recognition at the gala, but of decades of careful preparation, disciplined execution, and relentless pursuit of competence. This reflection solidified her internal sense of authority and agency, emphasizing that professional achievement and self-worth were independent of familial validation. Later, she convened a brief strategic meeting with her senior management team. Minnie Hook. The agenda included the review of newly identified investment opportunities and operational improvements. Sophia guided the discussion with clarity and precision, integrating data, forecasts, and risk assessments seamlessly. Her team's engagement and responsive insight reflected both their respect for her leadership and the effectiveness of the culture she had cultivated: disciplined, accountable, and innovative. These professional victories, grounded in competence rather than the desire for recognition, reinforced the structural and cultural foundations of the bank. During a quiet break, Sophia glanced at her phone and noticed another message from Lila, tentatively inquiring about future expansion plans. Minnie Hook. Instead of responding impulsively, Sophia considered the implications and provided a measured, professional answer that maintained her authority while satisfying curiosity. The interaction exemplified the delicate balance she had learned to strike between professional transparency and strategic discretion, a balance shaped by years of navigating family dynamics and professional responsibilities. As evening approached, Sophia reflected on the cumulative progress of the day. Minnie Hook. She recognized that each interaction with her family, each professional accomplishment, and each strategic decision had been a step in reinforcing her independence and self-worth. The quiet satisfaction of seeing her efforts bear fruit, without requiring approval from those who had long dismissed her, provided a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that empowerment was both an internal and external process, one that required continuous vigilance, strategic thinking, and disciplined execution. Sophia spent the remainder of the evening reviewing correspondence and preparing notes for the upcoming week. Minnie Hook. A potential collaboration with an international client presented a new opportunity to expand the bank's reach and influence. She meticulously drafted proposals, anticipated questions, and outlined strategies, ensuring that her next steps would be as calculated and precise as the efforts that had brought her to this point. The subtle interplay between professional growth and familial recalibration continued, each reinforcing her authority, competence, and independence. Before leaving the office, Sophia paused to reflect on the journey from childhood to the present. Minnie Hook. She thought of the countless evenings spent studying alone, the meticulous attention to financial details, and the quiet perseverance that had built the foundation for the bank. Each memory underscored the contrast between the dismissive environment of her family and the recognition she had earned in her professional life. It was a validation not contingent on their acknowledgement, but firmly rooted in her own skill, judgment, and strategic insight. The chapter closed with Sophia walking through the city streets of Charleston, lights reflecting off the wet pavement from a light evening rain. Minnie Hook. She allowed herself a rare smile, aware that the subtle recalibration of her family's perception was ongoing, while her professional trajectory remained firmly under her control. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Fully cognizant that the empowerment, recognition, and competence she had cultivated would continue to shape both her professional and personal life in the months and years to come. Sophia Anderson sat at her office window, the city of Charleston glowing beneath her in the late evening light. She allowed herself a quiet moment to reflect on the path that had brought her here, the countless hours of study, the internships that tested her patience and skill, the meticulous construction of her bank from a small portfolio of distressed assets to an institution recognized across the financial community. Minnie Hook. A brief notification appeared on her phone, an invitation from an international investment consortium seeking her guidance on a new project. She smiled, quietly acknowledging the continued expansion of her influence and the tangible validation of her expertise. The evening's calm allowed Sophia to think back on the gala, the subtle but undeniable shifts in her family's perception, and the way the room had collectively acknowledged her accomplishments. Jonathan's stoic composure had finally given way to fleeting moments of uncertainty. Margaret's polite distance had softened into tentative curiosity, and Lila's smirks had evolved into reluctant acknowledgement. Minnie Hook. She remembered the precise moment Richard Chen had introduced her to the audience, his voice steady, his endorsement unassailable. That single act, coordinated yet effortless, had created a public acknowledgement that her family could not ignore, even if they struggled to process it fully. Sophia considered the lessons embedded in those years of oversight and undervaluation. Minnie Hook. Every dismissive word from her father, every casual ridicule from Lila, every habitual avoidance by Margaret had shaped her resilience and her ability to navigate complex social and professional dynamics. Those experiences had been painful at the time, but now they were the foundation of her composure, strategic thinking, and confidence. She realized that the empowerment she wielded was not merely the result of professional success, but of the internal fortitude forged through decades of subtle challenges and invisible learning. Her thoughts turned to the operational growth of the bank. Minnie Hook. She reviewed the latest quarterly report, noting improvements in client retention, operational efficiency, and portfolio performance. Each metric was a reflection of deliberate strategy, careful planning, and the disciplined application of expertise. She reflected on the culture she had cultivated within the organization, one that emphasized integrity, accountability, innovation, and the nurturing of talent. The team she had assembled operated with a sense of shared purpose, their dedication reinforcing the stability and credibility of the institution she had built from scratch. Sophia's reflection shifted to the broader implications of her journey. Minnie Hook. She recognized the stark contrast between external validation and familial acknowledgement. Recognition from colleagues, clients, and industry peers was meaningful because it was earned and sustained through observable impact. Her family's delayed realization of her worth highlighted the independence she had cultivated. She no longer relied on their acknowledgement to define her identity or measure her achievements. Every decision, every successful initiative was a testament to her autonomy and competence. As the night deepened, Sophia allowed herself to think about her relationship with her family moving forward. Minnie Hook. Margaret had begun to reach out more frequently, asking questions about professional matters with genuine curiosity, while Lila had tentatively acknowledged Sophia's insights during a recent conversation. Jonathan, though reserved, had made inquiries that hinted at growing recognition of her authority. Sophia understood that reconciliation and acknowledgement were processes, requiring patience and careful navigation, and she had the perspective to manage them without compromising her own boundaries or autonomy. Sophia spent time drafting correspondence to her board and senior team members, ensuring that operational continuity and strategic planning were maintained. Minnie Hook. An email from an international partner requested a detailed presentation on potential investment opportunities, signaling both trust and the expansion of her professional influence. She carefully prepared her notes, anticipating questions and potential concerns, and felt a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that her disciplined planning and foresight had positioned the bank for sustainable growth and impact. In her personal reflection, Sophia considered the nature of recognition and empowerment. Minnie Hook. She recalled the countless evenings spent alone, refining skills, analyzing data, and preparing for responsibilities she knew would one day fall to her. The work had never been about public acknowledgement. It had been about competence, integrity, and the quiet assurance of self-worth. Now, with public recognition and family awareness intersecting with her professional accomplishments, she appreciated the full spectrum of validation, understanding that the internal acknowledgement she had cultivated was more enduring than any external applause. Sophia's mind wandered to the subtle interactions that had shaped her family's perception. Minnie Hook. Lila had begun asking detailed questions about strategic decisions. Margaret had requested guidance on philanthropic initiatives linked to the bank, and Jonathan had called to inquire about operational metrics. Each interaction was an opportunity for Sophia to reinforce boundaries, assert her authority, and allow her family to reconcile their assumptions with observable reality. She approached each moment with careful composure, ensuring that recognition was granted on her terms, maintaining both professionalism and personal empowerment. The reflection expanded to her broader impact within the industry. Minnie Hook. Invitations to speak at conferences, contribute to publications, and consult on complex financial portfolios were increasing. Sophia recognized that her influence extended beyond her immediate institution, touching communities and organizations that had previously lacked access to her level of expertise and insight. The empowerment she had cultivated allowed her to shape not only her own trajectory, but the opportunities available to others, reinforcing the purpose and significance of her work. Sophia considered the cumulative effect of the evening, the gala, and the years of preparation leading to this moment. Minnie Hook. She realized that the intersection of professional achievement and familial awareness had been carefully orchestrated, yet its impact had emerged organically. The acknowledgement of her competence and the subtle recalibration of her family's perception were simultaneous but independent phenomena, demonstrating that empowerment was not contingent on the validation of others, but rather the result of disciplined action and sustained competence. As the evening drew to a close, Sophia reviewed her plans for upcoming initiatives, ensuring that operational and strategic objectives remained aligned with the bank's mission. Mini-hook. A final message from Richard Chen hinted at an opportunity to lead a cross-state portfolio initiative, an expansion that would further establish the bank's influence and her authority. She considered the balance of professional responsibilities and personal reflection, understanding that empowerment required both visibility and continued dedication to competence. Sophia's final reflections turned inward, contemplating the lessons she wished to convey to others. Mini-hook. She thought of young professionals, particularly women who had been dismissed, undervalued, or overlooked, and considered the message she might share. Recognition, she realized, was secondary to competence, integrity, and strategic discipline. True empowerment was the cultivation of skill, judgment, and the ability to act independently, regardless of external acknowledgement or familial perception. She glanced at her phone one last time that evening, noting a series of congratulatory messages from colleagues, clients, and industry peers. Mini-hook. Each note reinforced the tangible impact of her work and the legitimacy of her authority. Sophia allowed herself a moment of quiet pride, acknowledging that her journey had been long, deliberate, and profoundly independent. The validation she had cultivated was now visible externally, but it had always been rooted internally, sustained by her own discipline and commitment. Sophia rose from her chair, looking out across the city lights of Charleston, reflecting on the interplay of professional success, familial recalibration, and personal empowerment. Mini-hook. She recognized that the journey was ongoing, that influence, recognition, and authority required continued attention and deliberate action. The evening had provided closure for long-standing dismissals while simultaneously reinforcing the enduring significance of her own agency. Turning to her audience, Sophia might have said, if words were to be shared beyond the private reflections of her office, "Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. Build, grow, and define your own success. Recognition may come late, or it may never come from some, but the work, the discipline, and the integrity you cultivate are yours to claim. Stand firmly in your competence and let your actions speak." Mini-hook. A subtle smile crossed her face as she considered how her own story could inspire others who had been overlooked or undervalued, emphasizing that empowerment and self-worth are cultivated, not granted. Finally, Sophia closed her laptop, signaling the end of the evening's reflection. Mini-hook. She stretched slightly, mindful of the work yet to come, the opportunities awaiting, and the subtle but ongoing evolution of her family's perception. She leaned back, allowing herself one last moment of quiet satisfaction before turning her attention to the next day's strategic plans, reinforcing the ongoing cycle of disciplined action, professional growth, and personal empowerment. Sophia's journey, from being dismissed as a child to being publicly recognized as a billionaire bank owner, was complete for this chapter, but not for her life. Mini-hook. She whispered to herself, "The work continues," a final acknowledgement that true empowerment is ongoing, deliberate, and unbounded by the validation of others. As a final note to those listening, Sophia might have said, "If you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or undervalued, remember that your worth is determined by your actions, your discipline, and your integrity. Build anyway, grow anyway, and define your own path." Share your thoughts below. Comment with your own stories of perseverance, like this video if it resonates, and subscribe to follow more journeys of empowerment and self-discovery. The stage they deny you is not the only stage that exists. You can create your own.